Cool. So, hello, and thanks for joining us to talk a little bit about how we've designed spatial audio for hybrid communication in mesh. As if you're here, you probably know that audio is a really big part of any immersive experience. So today we want to share with you a little bit about how we created a product strategy for spatial audio and the design process and challenges that we encountered along the way. I'm Aili. I'm a technical audio designer for Microsoft Mesh. I have a background in end-to-end spatial audio design and engineering development. I primarily work on creating the technical tooling as well as creating the voice experience and sound design for Mesh. I'm actually a hybrid worker, so I go into our Redmond office about half the week. That makes me a customer of Mesh as well. And I use it to collaborate with my remote colleagues that I sometimes get to see in person, like Kat.
Hi, yeah, I'm Kat, and I'm a senior product designer for Mesh developer tools. And I specialize in designing for emerging technology. And I'm also the co-chair of the Metaverse Standards Forum Privacy, Cybersecurity, and Identity Working Group. I work 100% remotely, and so I'm always working digitally with my colleagues. So let's start by taking a quick look at the immersive experience for Mesh and Teams. Sorry.
To jump into immersive spaces, integrated right within your Teams workflow. In Microsoft Teams, schedule and join your immersive meeting the same way you would schedule a typical Teams video meeting. Once you're in the meeting, click the View button on the screen. You can join immersive spaces from your PC or from a VR headset. If you're viewing from your PC, you can move around with your mouse or by using the WASD keys to move left, right, forward, and backward. To teleport, hold down the left mouse button on the location you want to go. Immersive Spaces has spatial audio, which allows you to have side conversations, chat one-on-one, or facilitate group discussions easily. Simply grab a friend and move away from the group to have a side conversation. As you get further away from the main group or turn in a different direction, their audio will decrease. A message notifies you once you've left the main meeting audio zone, which will allow you to start a side conversation without leaving the main meeting. Once you are finished with your side conversation, you can move back toward the group to rejoin the main discussion.
So Mesh is, as you can see, part of the M365 ecosystem, but we also have a standalone platform, and if you want to have a little taste of what that feels like, we have a demo downstairs at the Oculus booth. So that video talked quite a bit about spatial audio. I actually didn't even see that video until after the release, and I was like, what? That's what I worked on. That's crazy. So how many of you know what spatial audio is? Wait, that's awesome, because 5 years ago, there were a lot less hands. So this may be a little bit repetitive. We're not going to go into too many technical details here. But at its core, spatial audio is just how we hear normally in everyday life. There's no such thing as non-spatial sound in the world that we live in. In order to model this then virtually, we want to externalize sound. When we play back audio over mono or stereo headphones, we have this effect where audio is placed between our two ears, sort of behind our eyes, either in the center point if it's mono or somewhere between if it's stereo. So we want to take those sounds and bring them out into real space to improve presence, immersion, all of the good stuff. To do that, we're going to need to, there's a lot of ways that we can model it, but at its foundation, any spatialization algorithm is going to require you to model distance, direction, and some type of acoustic space. Sometimes we do this for reflections, but there's other ways to do it. So it can kind of seem as seamless as taking a spatialization algorithm and just putting all of your sounds through it. There's an engine for a reason. But when we look around at a product that has as many capabilities as Mesh and that's meant for really complex social functions, there's really no one-size-fits-all solution. And that's where spatial audio strategy really needs to come into play, and I need to collaborate with Kat to make that happen.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, we'll talk a bit about our product strategy. So strategy is just a really fancy word for a plan, and it's a way for us to understand who's going to be using our product, what are their needs, and how will spatial audio in particular meet those needs, and then how do we prioritize all of the elements and the mini features that make up that larger experience. How do we prioritize that and work with other people across our design team on the roadmap? And this process that we went through, the design thinking process, really did help us align as a team and get really crisp on what we needed to build and how we were going to approach it. But like any well thought out plan, there's always bumps in the road when you start making things, so we're gonna get into that. But first, let's look at our customers. So Mesh for Teams has many different user profiles. But we're going to focus today on two key audiences, our attendees and our facilitators. Here you can see a list of the different experience goals that these two audiences have. And the highlighted ones are really the specific outcomes that our spatial audio helps to meet. So for attendees, having conversations and contributing to a collaborative experience is really essential to having a meaningful meeting. And for facilitators, they want to be able to lead conversations and moderate a room, to make that meeting high quality and very successful. Interestingly, everybody that goes into an immersive space has privacy concerns. They want to know who can hear me, who's talking, but who can hear me? Where can I have a private conversation? Can I even have a private conversation? Really important, and spatial audio really plays a very important role in creating that trust inside Mesh. It's also really important to look at context. Aili mentioned we have many platforms and devices that people join in Mesh. We have folks who join from 2D video Teams experiences. And then we have the 3D folks. They're either joining on our desktop app or they're going in through a headset. So we had to think about how all of these things come together to have a seamless experience. We did some deep research to really understand some of the challenges that folks have with virtual meetings in general. And if you remember, we all but went from working in the office to working in, working primarily in video. You can't have those informal conversations. You can't just walk over to someone's desk and chat. Everything's very structured. You have to call a meeting. And then when you're in that meeting, there's all this sort of when can I talk? Am I interrupting? So it can be quite tiring, a lot of fatigue. And then also when you're in the immersive experience, you kind of want to have extra things. You want to be able to, maybe have a chat with someone, or you want to be able to see when people are talking. You don't just hear them, but we want to have all these cues. So we wanted to keep all of these needs top of mind as we started to design the experiences. We wanted to understand our customer needs more deeply, so we brainstormed all the different jobs to be done or tasks that were related to conversations, and we plotted them on this 2x2 that you can see. One axis was looking at private conversations to public conversations. If I'm having a one-on-one with somebody, or if it's many-to-many. We wanted to really understand that range of those needs. And the other axis was, okay, what can we take care of with environmental, like with the spatial audio, and what can we take care of with interface, like user controls, UI, etc., visual cues. This way, we were able to see what different jobs to be done could be taken care of by global spatial audio configurations. What ones could be global features and cues that everybody would see and share in the space. And what ones would be personal features and cues, like my own personal settings or notifications that only I see. This helped us really sort of, get crisp on what we were building. And then, of course, we're also plotting on the customer journey. Now, this is a very simplified map, but we really wanted to see, what the main moments of the experience were in each phase. And then we were able to do the feature stacks underneath. And it was important for us to do this so that we made sure that we were making every moment or every phase, we had that a nice cohesion of the experience across it. But it also helped us understand what other teams that we would need to work with. We had the spatial audio team, but we were also working with environmental designers, UX, UI crew. So this was a great way for us to make that plan. And then, no strategy is complete without having some design principles. So we wrapped everything up to have some guidelines as we started on our journey of designing to make sure we could make some really good decisions. Above all, natural sound. We wanted to make spatial audio mimic the real world as much as possible. That was the first and foremost, most important thing. We also really wanted to, support those organic conversations. People could have unstructured conversations, multiples at the same time, and without interrupting others. And we constantly asked that as we designed. And then when we did employ different controls, we wanted to make sure that they were easy to understand, easy to find, all those usability heuristics that we've been designing with for a long time. In terms of priority, the spatial audio work was priority one. We wanted to create that natural environment, and we wanted spatial audio to be able to stand on its own as much as possible, to really make that space feel and sound immersive and have all of that spatialized experience. The second priority was to look at and layer in the UX and UI controls, visual cues, et cetera. They were more complex to build, and we had to work with other teams. But we also really, we needed that solid base of spatial audio to work off of. So spatial audio first, and then the UX second. And Aili is now going to talk about the specifics of her audio design work.
Thank you. So while the focus of this talk is obviously on voices and how we designed them in Mesh, there's a wide landscape of sounds that we need in order to actually make this a super high quality experience. So this is a really rough framework that I like to use sometimes to get an understanding of all the sounds that I'm going to need to think and consider when I'm designing my flow. So we've got UI sounds. That's anything from confirming a press, going forward, going backward, navigating in virtual space, order of operations. This has to convey clear information concisely and has repeatability. We also have sound effects. So sometimes we say, whatever you can see, you can hear. That means that anything that kind of moves, any animations, emotes, emojis, if avatars get feet, then we can get footsteps. And one of the, I think, most valuable elements here in terms of leveraging sound design for a good communication experience is your environment sound. No space is silent. So if you have a virtual environment, you will need to add room tone or some kind of sound that gives a user the sense, this almost subliminal sense of a room. Then we have voice design, which I think is one of our really unique characteristics. We have such an intimate relationship to how we sound in a space, how others sound in a space. Even now as I'm talking, it's a completely different experience than I have in my day-to-day life. That has an impact on how I feel, on the ergonomics of my experience. To do that, we need to think about an acoustic engine that the voices and the sound design is going to be processed by. And finally, no matter what we're touching, we need to think about where it is in the space and how we want to maybe creatively work with the space to leverage the environment with the experience. So this is an example of some just ambience. Here, there's this lake or river. So we're using gaze or angle to fade in that noise, which we might not want to hear all the time, so that we will just hear it when we're looking at it, really. In this interior space, we want things to be a little bit quieter. We want to focus this space to have conversations with people in teams. But as we leave, we get this sense of openness, of exteriority. And then my claim to fame is the radio player in this environment. And we go back inside of the meeting zone where things are quiet once more. And this is one way that we can, through just the ambient design, leverage all the tools in our arsenal to create a high-quality experience. But we can also get interactive with it. So we have this sphere sculpture that creates these really beautiful, delightful interactions. Here I'm playing with it. We have this harmonious loop that's playing at the base level. So you can have conversations over it. It's not too weird if I'm talking over this sound. And then together we can start playing with it, and it becomes a spatial instrument.
Super fun when you have the controllers in your headset. It's amazing.
So that's a little bit on sound design and anything that's sort of pre-rendered. But whenever we have people in the environment, we get real-time audio. That means we need to look at handling complex social scenarios, anything from a small group conversation to a large presentation, an all-hands meeting, town hall, watching videos together, watch party, onboarding new members of your team with unique experiences. We had some challenges to consider then in this space. We might have different areas where we have different social activities or different activities taking place, or we may have the same place with different activities taking place. And that might require some different settings in terms of how we communicate with each other. We also have this challenge that different environments are of different sizes, right? So how I expect something to sound in this room versus another will differ, except in virtual spaces, unlike in real spaces, we expect things to be working perfectly all the time. So we want to make this optimal experience. We may want to make things sound natural and realistic, but we also want to make it sound even better than it does in real life. And so to do this for mesh, we had another technical limitation, which is that we're cross-platform and we are dependent on WebGL. That means that we can't use any additional plugins or spatializers, DLLs, that you may be familiar with, like Oculus Spatializer or something like that, to deploy our worlds. We had to build our own custom engine within Unity to enable a lot of these scenarios. And that's where we came out with audio zones and voice settings. This is a top-down view of the environment that you just saw. I really believe that if any of you are building virtual environments or XR experiences today, I encourage you to think about the space in terms of what social interactions and conversations are going to be held in there, and your expectations of how far away you'll be able to hear what. So in this example, we have these different areas. In the purple space, you have the Teams area where you can talk to people that are not immersed, but just taking a call from their phone. We have another indoors area in blue, which is like long and wide and has this radio loungy experience. And then 3 different activities in the pink spaces. And we want to make sure that that sculpture with the round area doesn't bleed into this beanbag toss game that's in the other area. This is a place where we want lots of different social activities to take place, but we want them to be sort of discrete within the environment. So how do we go about building a spatial audio system for a virtual world? A lot of spatialization engines, as I mentioned, will take the room geometry and pass all the sound through those predetermined characteristics of how the room sounds and how your body and brain processes it. There's not that much customization that we can do. That's a generalization, but our approach is not groundbreaking. I know that's not exciting to hear, but it's actually very simple. but its simplicity is granular. It allows practical implementation and manipulation of sound behavior in a given space. So what we need to do is create a voice setting. How do we create a voice setting? We do that by summing together a number of filters. These filters are applied through distance and angle, as most spatial things are, and they're weighted, which allows for even more subtlety and nuance. The volume is the most important filter. This is where we get that main attenuation effect. But if we do that in virtual communication, if we just have this in virtual communication, we're going to have things like conversational bleed. So I might hear you very, very quietly, but I'm not going to be able to have a separate conversation with someone else because I'll still be able to make out what you're saying very clearly. So we need to add timbral effects and spatial effects like low-pass filtering and reverberation. Once you've made your setting, you can add it to a voice collection, which is sort of like assigning it to a purpose or a use. And this is another area that I think is really interesting because, like Kat mentioned, a presenter, we can create a different setting and assign it to that presenter role than we do with other immersed participants. Furthermore, we can trigger those changes or change the voice collection with a 3D volume. So as a creative environment developer, I could be in this space and we have this set of rules over here, and then I have a trigger collider over here, step over here, and we have a new set of behaviors or rules that take place. And this is really unique because these zones are intelligent, they know about each other, they prioritize accordingly, and therefore the audio processing accordingly. So this is what an example of like a collection of voice settings for different purposes might look like. You are probably most familiar with some kind of default spatialization. Okay, I came into this virtual world and this is how it sounds. This is spatial audio. Well, we need immersed participants to have some sort of default spatialization when they come in. But we also need to have a setting for presenters when they're speaking to the whole crowd of people. And for that, I add a special reverberation filter so that we can distinguish those voices, so that when I hear two voices that are the same volume, Kat over here next to me, and a presenter that's across the room, I know that that presenter's voice is not next to me. Then media players is a really important part of the experience to consider. We have scenarios where we have like a huge video that needs to play through the whole space, or maybe it's like a museum scenario where you have lots of little media players. So we determine that here. And then, really importantly, how do the immersed users speak to the Teams users? What does that sound like? And this is super important because the greatest experiential challenge that we had so far was enabling this mesh to Teams communication. To do this, we had to merge two separate audio stacks and somehow make the transition between them seamless. There are a lot of challenges that bubbled up when we were building a 2D to 3D experience work. First off, there's no occlusion between these areas with different functions, at least in most of our spaces. So to give you an idea of what that sounds like, Kat and I could be in the Teams meeting zone chatting with our 2D participants and then not seeing this boundary on the floor. There's some tape over here. I might just like step away and then suddenly I stop hearing Kat. It's a 1 to 0 switch. That kind of feels like a bug. So to add to that challenge, Teams users don't hear immersed users spatially. We have this kind of inverse effect. So we need to find ways to create parity between the two platforms. We need to get really creative in solving these experiential issues with a variety of tactics, from visual cues, from the border boundary, as well as notifications, pre-rendered murmur sounds, intelligent border proximity-based behavior, and other sound design tricks. So this is sort of a prototype or early experiment in how we could get creative with okay, we have this pretty intense technical limitation. How can we creatively use spatial audio to solve it?
Is part of
This is the before.
Immersive and make, like, maybe have, I don't know if you're familiar in
my wife and daughter to France.
This is the updated version.
Spent a week in Paris.
Oh, wow.
And then from there drove down to the south of France, past Avignon.
Nice.
So nice.
Yeah, that
Very
sounds
nice.
super cool.
What about you, Sarah?
29. Like she was living in this little town.
Baby steps. So we hope to have given you a little taste or sampler of how we melded together two complex platforms into one cohesive experience and developed audio and voice setting tooling that gives creators the reins to create imaginative spatial audio design that they have control over in enterprise meeting experiences and to improve communication.
Because as you know, communication is really key to mutual understanding and just, working together successfully. And, we don't need technology to be the reason why we're having misunderstandings. I think humans kind of do that really well themselves. We think about it as like as we continue to build these hybrid communication features, like what new forms of communication are possible. Just like virtual conferencing, like all the video calls brought the world together, really, to create and communicate. What new opportunities will we be able to make inside these immersive experiences? What can we do? So today, thanks so much for coming. We shared how we developed our product strategy, how we leveraged spatial audio for immersion and co-presence, and how we design those cross-platform interactions. Does anybody have any questions? We have a couple minutes. Oh, we have a hand here. Go to the mic, I guess.
Hopefully this will be quick. Love the zones and voice settings. That's awesome. The river that you said happened when you looked at it, is that a built-in thing, or did you have to use visual scripting to kind of fade that in and out when you looked at it?
Oh yeah, that's a different, so for sound design, we have an audio manager package that's built into the Mesh toolkit. And with that, it has, you can build in parameters, basically, with visual scripting. So you can add in a gaze as or like angle from an audio source as a parameter for that sound. And you can have that parameter affect pitch, volume, and whatnot. So if you look at the audio manager in the toolkit, then you should find hopefully some documentation for that. If not, send me an email.
Hi, thanks so much for this. This is fabulous work. I guess I'm curious from an accessibility standpoint. First, I'm sure this is obviously a major improvement for blind and low vision users, but I'm wondering if you talked to them or if it affected the research here at all. And then second, how does this also affect any plans that you might have for captions and when and where those should appear?
Those are really good questions. Because we're like a new platform, we have some accessibility is definitely like on our roadmap, and it's coming, and so we do have captions that will be coming soon. But when we first launched, because we're just like an early starting product, a lot of those things we're just continually building. So we had to get that sort of first platform out, and now we're like continually improving it as we go along. But those are great questions. And there's certainly things, like we had lots of conversations around, well, what if you only can hear out of one ear? How does spatial audio work for this person? Mm-hmm. So we did do a lot of like talking, and we worked very closely with our accessibility team around that.
As well as our R&D team, we have a team in England that does a lot of research into this that we work with pretty closely. So trying to bring in as much of that as possible, anything, all kinds of accessibility tooling from audio beacons to, and this is where you as a developer can also build accessibility into your spaces. So whatever you see missing from what we're building first party, please build it using visual scripting so that we can have more fodder to light up the flame.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And come visit us. I'm going to be down in the booth in Meta. They're our partner, and I'll be demoing. You can come down and demo Mesh. Come and visit us in the immersive space.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.